Discover how an inspiring mountain man transformed 5 drunks' lives after they harassed a teacher. The crisp autumn air bit at Hank Wilkins's rugged skin as he stirred a pot of stew over his campfire, the glow of the flames dancing in his hardened eyes. He relished this solitude, nestled in his corner of the Rockies, where he could escape into memories of family values instilled by his father. Dignity and respect, the 2 pillars he held dear, especially for those who devoted their lives to others. But tonight, as laughter floated down from Cascade Pines, his peace was instantly shattered. 5 drunks emerged from the tavern, swaggering like wolves with cracked smiles and slurred words. Hank's brow furrowed as he watched them. They hurled insults, mocking Miss Thompson, the beloved schoolteacher who dedicated her life to nurturing the children in their town. Anger burned in him, a fire fanned by the ghosts of his own youth, a time when he too sought approval from reckless friends. The urge to intervene clawed at him, but he hesitated. What could he say? Would they listen? Or would they just laugh him off, shove him aside like they had with so many before? He knew the choices they'd made, choices he had strayed from years ago. His father had taught him that real strength lay in showing compassion, in refusing to retaliate in anger without understanding the struggle behind the wrongs. He felt a crush of fear, not for Miss Thompson, but for the drunks, for the lost opportunities ahead of them. Could he help them see their potential? And why, despite their actions, was he drawn to the idea of redemption for them? As he sat by the fire, recalling his father's lessons, Hank's heart twisted. He wanted to be the man who inspired change, not the one who simply scolded fools. He could hear his old friends' laughter, the echoes of poor decisions they made together, decisions that wrecked lives. He inhaled deeply, considering the daunting prospect before him. Was it his place to guide these men? Hank felt a compulsion to help them rise from the depths of their jeering ignorance, but his heart raced with doubt. Was he truly cut out to be a beacon of strength? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Determinedly, Hank set off down the trail, each step heavy with purpose. He felt like an avenging angel, and not. These men weren't deserving of ire, but of a wake-up call. Would they be receptive, or would his presence ignite resistance? His fists clenched with resolve, yet a sinking feeling bloomed in his chest. He could hear their raucous laughter echoing through the trees, and the dread of confrontation stung. Could he break through their layers of bravado with his story? Would it even matter? Just as his heart began to surge with unexpected hope, he stepped from the cover of the trees into the clearing. The crude jesting quieted, and 5 pairs of startled eyes fell on him. Here he stood, a mountain man created from grit and resilience. His resolve mustered, but doubt loomed larger than the towering peaks surrounding them. This moment was crucial, a turning point walking the fine line between hope and despair. Would he be wielding a lifeline or a blade? His future and theirs hung in the balance. Silence draped over the clearing as Hank squared his shoulders, sizing up the 5 men. The harsh flicker of the fire cast long shadows, magnifying the tension. They wore expressions etched in surprise, their bluster momentarily eclipsed by the sudden presence of someone who was unafraid to confront them. Hank could sense their initial confusion, perhaps even recognition of the man they once overlooked, a rugged individual, far from intimidation, standing emboldened in his purpose. Enough! Hank's voice cut through the silence, resonating with the authority he didn't know he possessed. It was a simple word, packed with gravity. He noticed their jaws tighten, each aware of the undercurrent of their actions, yet perhaps too proud to admit it aloud. "What do you want, old man? Played hopscotch with the rocks in the mountains? One of the drunks sneered, trying to regain the upper hand. Laughter bubbled for a moment, but it felt hollow. They were waiting, gauging his response. Hank took a deep breath, steadied by the scent of pine and dirt that reminded him of home, of resilience. They were simply frightened boys, lost in a facade. "I want you to think about what you've done tonight," he replied sharply, meeting their eyes one by one. "About the woman you chose to mock. You've thrown away respect like it's nothing. But I know you can do better. You have that choice." The bravado wavered as Hank continued. "I've walked a path littered with poor choices. I remember when I sought approval in all the wrong places, too. It's a hollow feeling when you wake up realizing respect isn't earned from drunken jeers or foolish bravado." Something in his words seemed to click within the group. The laughter had vanished, replaced by a livid silence as Hank pressed on. Each corner of his heart echoed his father's lessons: kindness, empathy, an unwavering stand against folly. They were shackled by their own fears of inferiority, desperately seeking validation through cruelty. Could you find your strength in uplifting others? Hank's tone slowed, a subtle invitation rather than an accusation. You stare at the world through an inebriated lens, blind to the potential that lies in connection and honor. The weight of his history flooded back, memories flashing of years spent in unsettling choices, conjuring the courage he had since gained. For the first time, he noticed the flicker of doubt washing over their faces. "I've seen the other side of that coin. I lost friends, saw lives twisted by addiction and anger. Those are paths nobody wins, but it doesn't have to be your fate." The sincerity in his tone echoed against the mountain, drawing them in. What Hank hadn't anticipated was the intensity of their reactions. The group shifted uncomfortably, whispers starting amongst them like a gust of wind pushing through the trees. Would they laugh him off or get defensive? Just then, what he feared most happened. One of the men, a burly figure with a scar running along his cheek, stepped forward, fists clenched at his sides. "Who the hell do you think you are? You come here acting all high and mighty, but you don't know us." His voice reveled in anger, but something deeper seethed beneath. "You think you can save us? We're fine the way we are." Hank's heart raced. This was the tipping point. How could he pierce through their defensive walls? "I'm here to save no one but myself," he countered, a flame of determination igniting within. "But I want to show you that a better way exists. You don't have to be this, you can be more." As Hank's voice lingered in the stillness, he realized something urgent. The confrontation could dismantle the barriers of misunderstanding, or it could reinforce their misery. The stakes rose higher with each passing moment, and he was compelled to find a breakthrough. Would they hear him? Would he shatter their illusions and ignite the glimmers of hope? The unease escalated as uncertainty wrapped around his chest, demanding immediate resolve. The defining moment lay ahead, a moment that could reshape their lives, or seal their fate in regret. And as he wondered if success lay within his grasp, he felt an unfamiliar thrill at the challenge ahead, because the time had come to face the very darkness he once feared. The hulking man took a step closer, his face contorting with disbelief. Hank stood firm, unwilling to back down or falter in the face of provocation. Each second felt like an eternity. Hank's pulse thrummed in his ears, but he shifted his weight, reminding himself of his purpose. "I may not know you," Hank began, steadying his breath, "but I know pain. I've lived it, lost friends because of it, and I see you. You're drowning in it, too." A moment of silent tension passed as the men wavered on the brink of laughter or confrontation. Hank's resolve grew thicker with each heartbeat. "Nothing changes if we don't change. You cling to the old rituals of disdain, believing it's strength when it's nothing but a mask." The group stilled. The man with the scar opened and closed his mouth, trying to find the words to retort, but Hank could see the flicker of conflict in his eyes. Hank pressed on, sensing he had a moment to exploit. "What you're doing doesn't take courage. It's the easy way out. Real courage is stepping up and facing life with integrity, even when it's hard. He took a bold step forward. When we hurt others to feel better about ourselves, we become slaves to our own bitterness. How long will you let it rule you? Hank could hear the crack in the man's defenses, the quiet desperation behind his bravado. He noticed the eyes of the others shifting away from him, absorbed in their thoughts as if they were wrestling with invisible chains. The burly man's fists unclenched, and for a moment, vulnerability seeped through. "You think you're better than us?" he challenged, yet the strength in his voice held a wavering note. "No," Hank responded. "I'm just like you. I've fallen into the same traps, but tonight I'm choosing to stand for something different. And so can you." Time seemed to stretch as silence fell once more. Yet, in that stillness, Hank felt an unfamiliar sense of empowerment. He wasn't just trying to reach them. He was reclaiming his own narrative. A part of him that had been buried in the shadows could breathe freely again. One of the younger men, a slight figure with sunken cheeks, broke the spell of silence, his voice a quivering whisper. "How can we change? We've never known anything else." Hank felt a jolt of urgency. It was a legitimate question, one that demanded his full engagement. It starts with admitting there's a problem. Then it's taking small steps to forge a new path. Respect for others is born from respect for oneself. You've felt it too, haven't you? The longing for something real? He watched as the weight of his words settled among them. The defiance started to ebb, replaced by curiosity. Start by lifting someone up. It sounds cliché, but believe me, there's power in support. Hank's voice held a sincerity that pierced through their defenses as he recalled brighter days when he had been surrounded by good company, friends who had taught him the value of compassion and connection. "Maybe you could reach out to someone you've wronged," he suggested. "It won't be easy. You'll stumble. But take it from someone who's been there. Being part of the solution is what brings real strength." The group exchanged glances, a conversation flowing through unspoken respect and emerging camaraderie. The burly man's expression hardened. "What if we don't want to?" he questioned, his voice dropping an octave. "Then nothing changes," Hank replied, shaking his head slightly. "But if you open that door, real transformation can walk in. You'll either keep living for the moment or choose to build a legacy." The gravity of each word echoed around them, and Hank could feel it. Every single soul within that collective breath hung on the precipice of decision. Would they take the risk to step into something unfamiliar, anchor themselves in accountability, and confront their own darkness? In this pivotal moment, Hank faced a possibility so raw it sent a shiver up his spine. But as the night wore on and the fire crackled softly, he was met with the inescapable realization he couldn't turn back. The path of enlightenment was frail, and the choices made would define not only his journey, but theirs too. As anticipation swirled in the air, Hank stood resolute, ready to meet whatever came next. A daunting awareness creeping in. The hardest challenge wasn't just convincing them to change, but fostering that same bravery in himself. In that fleeting instance, an idea sparked, a flicker of hope ignited. Could he not only guide them, but also somehow reclaim the vulnerability he had long since sheltered? The answer loomed ahead, tantalizing yet terrifying. What if it was his own fear of failure that prevented him from embracing a chance at the profound change they all sought? Hank's heart raced as the fire crackled before him, illuminating the faces of the men around him. He felt unmoored, as though standing at the edge of a cliff, contemplating the leap into an uncharted abyss. Their reactions were unpredictable, each one a brushstroke painted with uncertainty, weakness masked by bravado, potential buried beneath layers of despair. In that charged atmosphere, Hank confronted an uncomfortable truth. He had stood before them, bearing his soul, but what had he truly shared? Did he possess the strength within him to follow through? The notion unsettled him. It ignited an internal struggle, threading doubt through the tapestry of newfound confidence he had just woven. Instead of allowing himself to spiral into self-doubt, Hank focused on the faces around him, searching for a sign of acknowledgement, evidence that his words had struck a chord. The burly man was no longer posturing. A waning defiance lingered in his eyes. The young man with sunken cheeks dropped his gaze, lost in thought, while another, whose ears were adorned with unfamiliar tattoos, leaned forward with curiosity creeping into his expression. What if we take that leap? Hank decided to voice the question hanging in the air, his voice steady yet purpose-driven. The group remained silent, the weight of uncertainty settling around them. What if we risk the discomfort of vulnerability? The burly man crossed his arms, still grappling with his pride. It was apparent he wanted to reject this notion, to cling to the comfort of aggression, but Hank sensed a crack in his armor. What if vulnerability just means showing your weakness? He shot back, the age-old defense rising to the surface. Vulnerability is not weakness, Hank countered, meeting the man's gaze directly. It's the acknowledgement that we're all flawed, that our past mistakes don't define us. He paused, taking a deep breath, urging himself to be honest. I lost friends because I didn't want to face my own failures. Now, I feel trapped by my own fear of what this path may hold. But we have a chance to break that cycle. As he spoke, Hank felt the words flowing not just from his mouth, but also from a deeper well of understanding he had only begun to access. Here he was, embracing his own vulnerability, sharing what had long been buried, the guilt, the pain, and the associated fears that haunted him. What if we just let go? Hank continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper as if inviting the collective into a sacred space. What if, instead of pretending, we learn from one another? He glanced around the circle, noticing subtle shifts. The young man with sunken cheeks looked up, eyes widening, mirroring the spark of possibility within Hank's chest. What kind of changes do you want to make? Hank asked, the transformation becoming less about him and more about the men before him. It was an invitation. Start small, identify the people you've wronged, and reach out. Even just a simple message of understanding can open a world of healing. The burden of skepticism hung heavy in the air, yet an unspoken acknowledgement flickered. Questions arose from their depths. Hank leaned in, ready to nurture the growth as he sensed the winds of change beginning to uncoil their rigid limbs. This wasn't just about his journey, it was a shared path now, and for the first time, he felt a distinct excitement mingling with his apprehension. But deep within, a nagging tension niggled at him. As much as Hank urged them to embrace vulnerability, could he discard his own fears? Could he genuinely step into a role not only as their guide, but as a man seeking his own redemption? The fire crackled, the warmth felt inviting yet deceptive. What awaited them beyond these charred boundaries? With every word, Hank experienced a mix of liberation and looming dread, aware that he needed to confront his profound uncertainty first before advocating change. Each step forward is terrifying, he conceded softly, but the most powerful journeys often begin with fear. The silence settled again, but this time it felt charged with potential. He caught the burly man studying him, the flicker of curiosity replacing the hardened facade. The dynamic was shifting. You've got something to say to us, the burly man almost demanded. What are you really afraid of? This was it. The moment was explosive, hanging in the air, demanding honesty. Hank hesitated on the brink of revelation. Could he unravel that inner fear and, in doing so, spark genuine change among them all? The fire seemed to dim as Hank prepared to share the truth he had kept hidden. A singular, confessional moment that could either fracture or forge an unbreakable bond. I'm not just afraid of failing you, he began, his voice steady but revealing the storm within. I'm terrified of facing what happens if I try and succeed. His admission lingered under the weight of the night, questions stirring, poised to unravel. What lay beyond the threshold of his admission? And would their courage, intertwined with his, lead them all to a destiny they dared not imagine? Hank felt the tension ripple across the circle, each man processing his words through the lens of their own struggles. Silence thickened, a tangible entity that both welcomed and stifled the vulnerability he had just laid bare. The burly man's brow furrowed deeper as he wrestled with Hank's confession, while voices inside Hank clamored for reassurance that his raw honesty would not repel them but draw them closer. He caught a flicker of movement from the young man with sunken cheeks, who was shifting from apprehension to curiosity. This nuance sparked a flicker of hope in Hank. If he could convey not just the fear of uncertainty, but the exhilaration of possibility, perhaps he could bridge the chasm between vulnerability and strength. "What's so frightening about success?" the young man finally asked, breaking the heavy silence. There was an eagerness behind his inquiry, a hunger for understanding that mirrored Hank's own desire for connection. This was the opening he needed. Hank took a breath, feeling the heat of the fire a mere backdrop to the intimacy of the moment. Each of us carries wounds that make us doubt, first our worth, then our capability to change. Success means confronting those wounds head-on. What if I succeed and no longer recognize the world I'm trying to save? The admission emerged fluidly, a cathartic release that felt both frightening and liberating. The men exchanged glances, each wrestling with their own demons. The burly man uncrossed his arms, a move that signaled the potential for openness. "Maybe that's it," he grumbled, almost to himself. "Maybe we're all just scared of what comes next." The acknowledgement hovered in the air, laden with a mixture of relief and trepidation. An idea surged within Hank, prompting him to lean into this newly formed alliance. What if we imagine success together? Not just for me or you, but for all of us. Picture it as a collective rebirth. He felt a rush of energy coursing through him, igniting a fire within that radiated warmth beyond the flickering flames. The young man nodded slowly, his features softening. "So, what do we do?" His earnestness invited more than just reassurance. It beckoned for a plan of action. Hank felt a rush of adrenaline, a sense of purpose reawakening within him. We document our journeys. Start by writing down the names of those we want to reconnect with, the ones we've lost touch with or hurt. Each name is a step toward healing. His words scrambled over one another, laced with urgency. And then we reach out to them, today, tomorrow, whenever we can. As the words flowed, Hank noticed shifts among the men. They leaned in, eyes glimmering with a newfound determination, perhaps sensing the power nestled in taking that first step. There were still shadows of doubt. He could tell they were cautious, but the veil of isolation inside their hearts was beginning to rip open. "I want to reach out to my brother," the young man murmured. "He's been gone too long." The burly man broke in, a hint of defiance remaining. "My uncle," he added, grudgingly accepting the truth of their collective experience. Hank nodded, encouraged by their willingness to lean into discomfort. "Exactly. We're going to shift the narrative. This is our chance to transform not just ourselves, but the lives of those around us." The words felt like a spell. He was weaving another layer of commitment to the tapestry of change among them. Yet, amid this budding excitement, Hank was aware that the night was still young and battles loomed. What if they faltered at the outset? What if their attempts at reconnection led to more pain than joy? He felt the anxiety curl in his gut, warning him not to expect too much. But then again, hesitation could no longer define him. The very act of stepping forward meant moving away from the paralyzing grip of fear. It was time to take that leap, just as he had urged them to. With one final look around the circle, he anchored himself deeper into their collective mission. "Tomorrow begins a journey we'll never forget," he said slowly, a quiet conviction settling in. As they rose to leave, the warm glow of the fire accompanied them, illuminating their pathways into the night. Each man stepped away with purpose etched into their footsteps, but within Hank still churned questions without answers. The excitement of change intertwined with the fear of potential failure, and ahead lay those very people who could either lift them all or undo every stitch they had begun to weave. With his own resolve flickering like the flames, Hank realized the next crucible awaited him. Would they dare to confront their individual pasts, or would the weight of their histories suffocate the newfound momentum? As they parted ways, he felt it in his bones. The real test was just starting. Would he be able to guide them through, or would his own fears and doubts sabotage the fragile connections he sought to build? Hank awoke to the pale morning light filtering through the curtains, a stark contrast to the flickering warmth of the fire he had left behind. The world outside seemed hushed, the chill in the air echoing the hesitation that clung to him. Last night had felt like a breakthrough, yet the weight of doubt pressed heavily on his chest. Had he truly inspired the men, or had he merely offered them empty words wrapped in a captivating narrative? He pushed the unsettling thoughts aside and swung his legs over the side of the bed. Today would be the real test. Retrieving a notebook from the clutter on his desk, he flipped to a fresh page, the blankness mirroring the uncertainty swirling in his mind. His plan began to take shape. Each name the men had mentioned last night was a thread in the tapestry of relationships they were ready to weave anew. But Hank realized that while they needed to take action, he too had to face his own ghosts. Without overthinking it, he wrote down the name that had haunted him for years. Jack. It felt both like a confession and a resolution. Jack was not just a name. He was Hank's brother, a figure looming large in Hank's past, representing a complex mix of love and betrayal. They had drifted apart after a family tragedy that had carved deep rifts into their lives. Could he really reach out to Jack now, after everything? Hank's hand quivered as he put the pen down. The fear of rejection gnawed at him, whispering, "What if he doesn't want to hear from you?" Ignoring the voice for the moment, he turned his attention back to the men. How could he encourage them to face their reckonings when he couldn't even do the same himself? He made a mental note to call Jack later, but first he had to prepare for the day ahead. Each of the men would be awaiting his direction, a position he felt ill-prepared for, even as he acknowledged the role he was stepping into. As he drove to the meeting place, he replayed the events of the previous night in his mind. The burly man, still stooped under the weight of guilt, had exhaled a tension that seemed to signify a fragile new hope. The young man with sunken cheeks had sought clarity, and in that moment he had seen a glimpse of his own younger self, filled with uncertainty, yet hungry for change. Hank was beginning to understand that leading these men would demand more than just encouraging them to reconnect with loved ones. It required confronting his own emotional scars. Arriving at the cafe, he noticed the men were already gathered around a small table, their expressions tinged with a mix of eagerness and apprehension. Despite the challenges ahead, Hank felt the familiar stirring of determination within him. "Hey, guys," he greeted them, attempting to mask his nervousness with a smile. "Ready for today? We're about to take the first big steps on our journey." As they exchanged cautious nods, he sensed the vulnerability in the air, punctuated by an undercurrent of anticipation. It struck him that they were all in this together, each grappling not only with relational fractures, but their own individual fears of rejection and failure. Hank leaned forward, drawing them in. "Let's start by sharing our names and why we chose them. What do they represent to you? What's the story behind reconnecting?" He observed the hesitant but genuine responses that followed. The younger man spoke of his brother with a quivering voice, while the burly man fought against a rough exterior as he shared his uncle's struggles, emotions bubbling to the surface. As they shared, Hank's heart raced. This was more than group therapy. It was a revelation. Each name revealed layers of pain and longing, and in their stories he caught fleeting glimpses of his own. Each disclosure forced him to confront the very idea he had struggled with. Vulnerability did not signify weakness. It bridged the gap to change. The session ticked on, with every story propelling them toward a shared understanding. But with each revelation, Hank sensed an impending storm brewing inside himself. A call to action balanced precariously against the fear of confronting Jack. Tension tightened in his gut, but as the last man finished sharing, Hank realized he was not just a facilitator. He was a participant in this transformative experience. Could he dare to turn the focus back to himself, to acknowledge the journey he was embarking on as well? "Guys, can I share something?" he interrupted gently, their eyes snapping to his like moths drawn to a flame. Before he could second-guess himself, he continued, "I have my own brother Jack, who I've lost touch with, and I want to reconnect with him today. I don't know how he'll respond, and I'm terrified. But I need to take this step, just as we all do." The air in the room shifted, charged with an energy that reflected their collective resolve. They weren't just hesitant men echoing each other's fears. They were allies, each preparing to carve a new path. With newfound clarity and urgency, Hank realized he was standing at a personal precipice. What would he discover on the other side of that phone call with Jack? Would courage break the silence of their estranged relationship, or would it ricochet like a bullet, leaving scars anew? The moment of truth awaited him, as it did each man around the table. All were teetering at the edge of their separate abysses, ready to leap toward the possibility of reconnection and redemption. And for the first time, Hank felt the collective weight of uncertainty, not as a burden, but as a shared experience, one that might finally anchor his own journey toward healing. With the echoes of their shared confessions still vibrating in the air, one question loomed large. Were they truly ready to face the ghosts of their pasts, or would the fear of reliving their pains hold them captive like shadows in a darkened room? Hank barely slept the night before, his mind racing with both memories and moments that threatened to unravel him. As he stared at the blank page where his plans for the day lay unformed, he recognized the stakes. Today was not just an opportunity for the men, it was a reckoning he had anticipated for years. When the session ended, a silence enveloped them. Hank could sense the way their breaths mingled, an uncharted camaraderie uniting their collective fears. He looked at each man, and a part of him desperately wanted to guide them, to foster their breakthroughs. Yet another part felt like a pretender, realizing that he was navigating murky waters alongside them, being drawn deeper by their vibrancy. After the session, they congregated in the parking lot, the sun shining brightly above, as if urging them to take action. Hank stumbled into the role of teacher and student, preparing to initiate something he had only dreamt of back in his quiet moments. "Okay, everyone, let's challenge ourselves today," he proposed, trying to stifle the tremor in his voice. "I want us to reach out to someone important to us, in whatever way feels right. It could be a text, a call, or even just writing a letter. Let's take this first step together. I'll do the same." The weight of the words hovered in the air, heavy but electric. Varied reactions rippled amongst the group. Nods of agreement and expressions of concern spun like the leaves caught in the wind. It was time to solidify their intentions as a collective force, as much as Hank's individual strength felt impotent beneath the defining weight of his anxiety. Each man peeled away into their own thoughts, their private battles already brewing before Hank's eyes. He remained for a moment longer, listening to the robust sounds of an engine starting up beside him before releasing his own breath he had held throughout the session. With determination, he sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel as if it were both lifeline and shackle. The voice in his head switched from the usual script of doubt to something that resembled resolve. He would succeed at making that phone call, no matter how overwhelming it felt. He fumbled for his phone and scrolled through the contacts, stopping at Jack's name. Memories surged unbidden. Childhood laughter and echoes of harsh silence, shared secrets hardened to barriers. The tension coiled within him like a spring, brimming against the foundations of fear and regret. Hank's smarting chest burned with the unspoken sentiment that refused to coalesce into clear thought. He pressed his thumb against the screen, hovering just above the call button. What was he waiting for? For the silence to speak back? "Fuck it," he muttered, pressing down. The ringing seemed to vibrate through his entire being, heartbeat syncing with each tone. When the call connected, Hank's heart raced. The expected voice, it did not come. The void of silence carried only the weight of years lost, decades even. He couldn't edit his feelings as he had during the session. He was raw and exposed. "Jack," he began, swallowing hard. "It's Hank. I know it's been a long time." There was a momentary silence, both on the line and within him, where every second stretched infinitely. He felt the eyes of the men who had begun to leave the parking lot, a physical reminder of the connections they were crafting with their own challenges. The voice that finally responded, though strained, didn't bring the anticipated wave of anger or rejection. "Hank, this is unexpected." Anxiety washed over him anew, but his knees trembled on solid ground. "I wanted to try to fix things, to reconnect," Hank urged, his own vulnerability spilling over like a cracked dam. "Can we talk?" As Jack hesitated, Hank caught the glimmer of hope within. This was a rare moment where he embraced the unknown. The hesitation was awful. Uncertainty pinched stinging edges into their voices. He didn't know what Jack would say next, what pearls of understanding or desperation would guide their dialogue. The reality dawned on him. Healing wasn't just about reaching others. It was about having the courage to dive into the unknown, into the depths of our roots, which often remained tangled in the shadows. "I'll meet you," Jack finally said, words that sent a rush of warmth through Hank's veins, igniting something he thought had become lost. With the call ending, Hank found himself rushing out of the lot, propelled by a force he could no longer ignore. Turning the key in the ignition, he became acutely aware of the time it would take to find and meet his brother. But there was no going back. Today was a juncture, a moment when hope merged with fear, intertwining their fates. Hank took a deep breath, adrenaline coursing through him. Could this be it? The day that would erase the silence, unspooled like a devastating tether? The path forward was cloaked in uncertainty, each step a sonorous echo leading him deeper into his family's past. What would Jack say? What stories awaited them? As Hank navigated the streets leading to their new meeting point, he was confronted with an emerging question that felt like an ultimatum. Was he prepared to lay bare every hurt and anger that stemmed from their shared history? Or would he allow fear to dictate their fate once again? Hank navigated the familiar streets, each turn invoking flashes of a shared past, laden with moments both cherished and painful. The looming meeting with Jack intensified his conflict. Hurt feelings morphed into a haze of anticipation and anxiety. Could he confront the unspoken, forging a bridge over decades of silence? With each passing block, Hank questioned his readiness. His mind spiraled through their history, the squabbles over trivial matters, the pain of estrangement, and the gravity of unresolved resentment. He reprimanded himself for the years lost, grappling with the guilt that, like a shadow, seemed to cling closer as he drove. Yet as he approached the cafe they had once frequented, he was struck by a crucial realization. This journey was not merely about reconnecting with Jack, but also about solidifying his own identity. Stepping out of the car, the scent of brewing coffee wafted through the air, comforting, yet bittersweet. Garrulous laughter erupted from a nearby table, a painful reminder of frivolity he once shared with his brother. This dissonance sparked an internal battle. Could he recapture that connection? Or would their deepening rifts drown out the joy that once existed? Arriving inside, Hank's eyes scanned the room until they landed on a table nestled in the corner. Jack was already seated, hands wrapped around a steaming mug, his expression inscrutable as he surveyed the room. Hank's heart quickened. He felt both drawn to and repelled by his brother's presence. He approached cautiously, each step feeling as if it carried the weight of years. "Hey," he greeted, his voice wavering in the charged atmosphere. Jack's gaze met his, momentarily searching before settling into a guarded mask. "Hey," Jack replied, a mere echo of warmth that Hank had longed to hear. Silence replaced the customary pleasantries, thick and tangible around them. This was not just a conversation, it was an excavation of buried truths, and Hank wasn't sure where to start. They intertwined their hands around their mugs, the steam rising between them like an unspoken barrier. Hank wrestled with the words. They felt lodged in his throat, too complex to articulate. Yet somewhere within him brewed the resolve to push past the discomfort. "I've thought about calling you so many times," Hank began, his breath catching against the vulnerability he'd summoned. "I didn't know how to bridge the gap. I guess I wanted to start fresh to figure out what went wrong." A minute passed before Jack's eyes softened, tracing the contours of Hank's face in a manner that hinted at an echo of understanding. "You think that's enough? To just act like it's all behind us?" His voice was low, packed with guarded emotion. Hank recoiled slightly, the challenge hitting closer to home than he anticipated. "It's a start," he responded, determination sharpening each syllable. "We can't fix everything in one conversation, Jack, but I'm here to try." Jack shifted in his seat, flicking a glance toward the cafe's entrance. There was an urgency in his demeanor, and Hank felt the weight of unaddressed grievances pressing into their space. "You've had the chance to live your life without the baggage of family. What do you want from me, Hank?" The question sliced through Hank, exposing deeper truths he'd feared confronting. I need to understand why we stopped being brothers," he confessed. "I want to face whatever pain has come between us. If not now, when?" The tension frayed at the edges of Jack's resolve, his expression wavering between defiance and a flicker of hope. The silence that enveloped them was no longer a void. It was a crucible where both anger and vulnerability could finally meet. "Okay," Jack eventually murmured, threading his fingers through his hair as if summoning courage. "But be prepared. This won't be easy." Hank nodded, releasing a breath he hadn't fully realized he was holding. They were about to unearth buried grievances, a process that would demand honesty they had both glossed over in the past. As they began to delve into their histories, Hank felt a glimpse of empowerment igniting within him. This was a chance not just to heal his relationship with Jack, but to redefine his own narrative in the waking world. He could feel the walls within him slowly unearthing, making way for the truth. But as the conversation deepened, poised to surface the roots of their estrangement, a sudden shift in Jack's demeanor caught Hank off guard. The deeper they excavated into their shared pain, the more volatile the exchange became. Hank's heart raced. The tangibility of reconciliation now danced dangerously close to unraveling. Would they be able to navigate through this vulnerability without resorting to blame? As their dialogue teetered between the fragile and the fragile, Hank's thoughts spiraled into one stark recognition. Could this truly lead them toward healing, or were they wading into turmoil that might once again tear them apart? Hank's heart pounded as Jack's tense words hung in the air, brittle and fraught with unspoken dread. The lives they'd led separately had shaped them into two distinct men, and now they were left to face the remnants of a bond that had once unified them. "I'm not asking for a tidy resolution, Jack," Hank declared, summoning his resolve. "I know life doesn't work that way, but I also know we can't keep pretending nothing happened." The words exploded from him, fueled by the frustration of years lost to silence. Jack leaned back abruptly, crossing his arms defensively. The dialogue was shifting. Just beneath the surface of their shared discomfort lay scars waiting to be reopened. "What do you even know about pretending? You've been gone, Hank. It's easy for you to claim you want to mend things now." A stab of resentment shot through Hank, but he fought it down, focusing instead on the underlying pain expressed in Jack's accusation. "Maybe I've been running, Jack, but I've also had the time to reflect. I realized that walking away was a way to avoid confronting my own failures." Jack's eyes narrowed, skeptical yet silently urging Hank to continue. It was a flicker of hope, reminding Hank of the connection they once had, a brotherhood strained but still glimmering in the chaos. "Look," Hank pressed on, I can't change the past, but I can acknowledge my part. I left when you needed me. I thought distance would make things easier, but all it did was amplify the silence. I need to know why we let it get this far." With a pained expression, Jack shifted his gaze, withdrawing into thoughts that threatened to encompass them both in darkness. The vulnerability between them cracked open wider, exposing unhealed wounds. Hank seized the moment. "Jack, we're here. Let's talk." Jack's fingers fidgeted with the mug, his breath hitching as though fighting against the tide of memories longing to break free. "You've seen the world while I don't know, gotten stuck in the same place. I built walls, believing they would protect me. And it worked until I was just left alone." The ache in Jack's voice cut through Hank, reverberating with the guilt that had weighed him down for years. In that moment, Hank recognized the prison of isolation connecting them. He was filled with a fierce determination, no longer just about bridging their relationship, but an urgent call to their shared humanity. "I can't change what's happened to us, but I want to help you break down those walls," Hank offered, his heart racing with uncharted emotions. "Let's figure out how we can move beyond this pain. We're brothers. It's time we faced this together rather than letting it drown us." Jack was silent for long moments, an internal battle flickering across his face. Hank could see the inner turmoil reflected within him, a mirror of his own struggle to reconcile the past. "You really mean that?" Jack asked, vulnerability layered beneath skepticism. "Yes, I'm tired of standing on opposite sides of a chasm we created," Hank replied, grounding his gaze into Jack's. "Let's take steps toward healing, together." The eyes that met his were no longer stormy but searching, as if weighing Hank's sincerity against years of disappointment. There was a fragile acceptance in Jack's expression, a willingness to seek clarity despite the fear of revisiting buried dread. But with acceptance came trepidation. Hank braced himself for the unfurling chaos that could unsettle their fragile truce. He sensed that with every truth they unearthed, there was a risk that hiding in their respective corners of the past could leave them vulnerable to collapse once more. "Okay," Jack nodded carefully, his voice barely above a whisper. "Let's talk about that night." A knot formed in Hank's stomach. The night Jack referenced had fractured them irrevocably. Resentments unleashed and unresolved emotions had led to the silence that enveloped them for far too long. Hank steeled himself for the revelations that awaited him, a night shrouded in darkness that would demand an acknowledgement of pain he feared could alter everything. The time had come to face those wounds. Could their journey lead them toward redemption, or would the rawness of their history shatter any hope of reconciliation? Hank steadied himself, knowing this conversation could alter the trajectory of their relationship forever. The air thickened with unspoken words, heavy and charged, as he looked into Jack's eyes, searching them for signs of how deep the wounds ran. "Tell me what's on your mind," Hank urged, allowing vulnerability to seep into his tone. He had to show that he wouldn't shy away from the discomfort of their truths, and he hoped Jack would reciprocate. "Do you even remember how it all started?" Jack asked, his voice trembling as he held on to the weight of the past. "I was trying to reach out to you after Mom died. I thought we would lean on each other." Hank felt the sting of guilt intensify, each recollection striking a nerve. "I remember," he admitted, the memories flooding back like an unrelenting tide. "I felt lost, like the world had shattered. I was scared." The tension in the room was palpable as Jack leaned closer, his anger mingling with sadness. "Scared? You disappeared into your new life and left me to deal with everything. You let all of our memories fade into dust." Hank braced himself, the flame of regret igniting into a blaze. "I wish I could take it back," he said softly, allowing the truth to settle in the thickened air. "I thought isolating myself would help, but I see now. It only pushed us further apart." "What do you think it was like for me?" Jack's voice softened, but the pain was raw. "I felt abandoned. You had a chance to escape, to find hope in the mountains, while I was stuck in memories that haunted me every day. Jack, I had my own demons, Hank insisted, shaking his head, desperately trying to convey that both of them carried burdens that had shaped their views of each other. But I should have been there for you. I didn't understand that my distance fractured what little glue still held us together. I blamed you for everything without recognizing my part. Jack's expression faltered. The anger he'd wielded like an armor began to crack. With a heaviness in his chest, Hank pressed on. We were two brothers who lost so much, and instead of bonding through our sorrow, we allowed it to drive us apart. When I thought of you, it was always with regret. I wish I had found a way to reach out. Silence enveloped them again, but rather than piercing, it transformed into a space ripe with possibility. Jack's shoulders relaxed slightly, revealing a chink in the wall he had constructed around his emotions. I've wanted to hear that for so long, he confessed, his words tumbling out like a long-held breath. But it took you a decade to even try. I know, Hank admitted, remorse washing over him. It took me years of loneliness to realize what running away meant. But here I am, wanting to rebuild. This isn't easy for either of us. We've let time fracture our bond, but we can still construct something new. As he spoke, Hank felt his heart quicken. Each confession was his way of not only seeking forgiveness, but also offering it in return. Would Jack see this new vulnerability in him as strength? Jack measured Hank's sincerity, his breath steadying against the vulnerability Hank had laid bare. So, what do we do now? He asked, vulnerability whispering through his walls like sweet music in the air. For the first time, hope flickered in Hank's chest. We create a new narrative. No more running, no more dwelling on the past. It's going to take time, Jack cautioned softly, uncertainty still lingering in his voice. I'm willing, Hank persisted. Let's start small. Call each other regularly. Share what we struggle with. Let's break the silence instead of letting it drive us back into the shadows. Jack looked at Hank, and in that moment, time seemed to slow as the weight of their shared pain resonated deeply. Here they were, two brothers, each armed with the raw honesty to face their past. The chasm once felt insurmountable, but as Hank spoke, he felt an undeniable shift. Okay, Jack finally conceded, a fragile smile breaking through the facade he'd built. Let's give it a shot. A rush of relief surged through Hank, and tears welled in his eyes, not of loss, but of rebirth. They weren't healed entirely, but the seeds of reconciliation had been sown. Both men had taken a step towards overcoming their pasts, glimpses of a future blossoming between them. No more running, Hank repeated, sealing their commitment together. Let's find strength in honesty. Although the journey ahead was fraught with challenges, Hank knew they had embarked upon a path toward healing, one that did not shy away from fear, but embraced it as a catalyst for growth. Their new foundation, fragile but firm, had been born not just from a rekindled bond, but from authentic connection. With a sense of profound achievement radiating from both men, they left the cafe together, not perfectly whole, but undeniably more complete than before, committed to each other and to every step of their shared journey ahead. Hank Wilkins had not only rekindled a lost relationship, he had proven to himself that confronting fear could pave the way for true connection. And in that connection, he embraced restless hope, an earnest desire to forge an unbreakable bond with his brother. Today was just the beginning, a significant turning point in his life, one that would resonate well beyond their recent conversation. He had conquered his fears through the willingness to face the past, and in doing so, discovered the transformative power of vulnerability. Now equipped with newfound courage, Hank stepped forward with confidence, ready to meet whatever challenges might lay on the horizon. And you need to subscribe now to this channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help us grow this community. Comment below your reactions and theories about the ending. What does this transformation mean for Hank and Jack's future? Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share.